The bank statement sat on my oak desk. A single charge glared at me. $4,000 at a ski resort in Aspen. Linda told me she was attending a crucial interior design symposium in Denver. Aspen is a long way from Denver. I picked up my phone and dialed the resort directly. I bypassed the automated system and reached the concierge. I read the confirmation number printed next to the charge. The concierge cheerfully confirmed a 3-night stay in a luxury suite for Marcus and Linda Vance. My wife's name is Linda Miller. Vance was her maiden name. She was sharing a room with a man named Marcus. I did not confront her. I put the phone down and opened my laptop. 2 years ago, I retired early after selling my logistics company. Linda was 40, 10 years younger than me, and restless. She wanted to start an interior design firm. I thought it was a brilliant idea. I funded the LLC. I put $50,000 into a business account. I agreed to cover our home mortgage, her car lease, her health insurance, and all utility bills. I told her to take zero salary and reinvest every penny of her profits back into her business. For 24 months, I paid for everything. Every time she needed more capital for marketing, inventory, or office space, I wrote a check. I believed I was investing in my wife's dream. I logged into the joint banking portal. I navigated to the business account. I am listed as the primary guarantor and a 51% owner of the LLC. I never checked the daily transactions because I trusted her. I downloaded the last 2 years of statements. I exported them to a spreadsheet and began sorting by vendor. The numbers told a story of blatant theft. There were regular payments to a residential property management group, $2,500 a month. Linda claimed this was for her commercial studio space downtown. There were weekly charges at high-end steakhouses, charges for men's golf apparel, and thousands of dollars spent at luxury jewelers. Interior designers buy fabric, paint, and furniture. They do not buy men's Rolex watches on a company card. I needed more proof before I took action. Walked down the hall to her home office. The door was locked. I retrieved my toolbox from the garage, popped the hinges off the door, and walked inside. I turned on her desktop computer. She had left her email logged in. I spent the next 4 hours reading through her sent folder and her digital receipts. I tracked the IP addresses of the bank logins. I saw that she was logging into the business account from a local real estate office Wi-Fi network. There were no invoices for clients. There were no blueprints, no fabric swatches, no vendor agreements for furniture. Instead, there were emails to Marcus. Hundreds of them. Marcus was a real estate broker she met at a networking event 2 years ago. The emails detailed their weekends away, their expensive dinners, and their shared luxury apartment. She had been funneling the LLC money into a joint account she opened with him. She was generating fake invoices on her computer, labeling them as inventory purchases, and then wiring the cash directly to Marcus. I printed every single email. I printed the fake invoices. I cross-referenced them with the bank statements. I built a binder of evidence that was 3 inches thick. I grabbed my car keys. I drove to the address Linda gave me 2 years ago for her commercial studio. I parked in the strip mall lot. I walked up to Suite 104. The sign above the door read Apex Chiropractic. I walked inside. A receptionist greeted me. I asked how long the clinic had been at this location. She told me they signed the lease 18 months ago. I asked if she knew an interior designer named Linda. The receptionist shook her head. Linda had leased the space for exactly 3 months, taken photos for her website, and then broken the lease. I walked back to my car. I pulled out my binder and found the name of the residential property management group receiving the monthly rent checks. I drove to their corporate office. I walked up to the front desk and presented my driver's license and the LLC formation documents proving I was the majority owner of the business paying the lease. I told the clerk I needed to verify the address on the account for tax purposes. She typed on her keyboard and handed me a printout. The address was not a commercial space. It was a luxury high-rise apartment complex in the Arts District. I drove to the high-rise. I parked across the street. I waited. 2 hours passed. The glass doors of the lobby slid open. Linda walked out. She was wearing a designer coat I paid for. A man walked out right behind her. He was in his late 30s, tall, wearing a tailored suit. He wrapped his arm around her waist. She leaned into him and kissed him. They walked to a silver Mercedes parked at the curb. I recognized the car. Linda told me she leased it for her business to drive wealthy clients around. I was paying the monthly note. The man got into the driver's seat. Linda got into the passenger side. They drove away. I did not follow them. I drove straight to the office of David Sterling. David is a corporate attorney and a ruthless divorce lawyer. We sat in his boardroom. I handed him the binder. I handed him the spreadsheet, the LLC operating agreement, and the printout from the property management company. I told him what I saw. I told him what I saw. I told him I wanted out, and I wanted to financially destroy the fake reality she built with my money. David spent an hour reading through the binder. He took off his glasses and looked at me. He explained the legal mechanics of our situation in precise terms. Because I was the majority owner of the LLC and the sole source of its capital, the business assets belonged primarily to me. Linda had been using corporate funds for personal expenses and falsifying documents to hide the theft. This is legally defined as embezzlement, fraud, and a severe breach of fiduciary duty. David explained that we did not need to wait for a slow-moving divorce judge to stop the bleeding. As the majority shareholder, I had the immediate, unilateral legal right to freeze the accounts, terminate the lease, seize the company vehicle, and dissolve the entity. We formed a strict timeline. I needed to execute the shutdown flawlessly. I drove to the bank. I sat with the branch manager, a man I had known for 15 years. I presented the LLC documents and the corporate charter. I instructed the manager to immediately freeze the business checking and credit accounts. No withdrawals, no transfers, no credit authorizations. I canceled all credit cards issued under the business name. I then moved to our personal joint accounts. I withdrew exactly 50% of the cash balance. I transferred it to a new, single-name account at a completely different bank across town. I instructed the manager to remove my name as the guarantor on her personal credit cards. Without my credit score backing them, the bank would automatically lower her limits to zero within 24 hours. I left the bank and called the property management company. I bypassed the front desk and spoke directly to the regional leasing director. I informed him that the LLC was ceasing operations immediately and would no longer guarantee the lease on the luxury apartment. The director informed me that the lease required a $10,000 penalty for early termination. I paid it on the spot using the funds I just secured. I instructed him to issue a 30-day eviction notice to the occupants and demanded that my name and my company name be removed from the lease liability immediately. Next, I called a commercial towing company. I gave them the license plate and the VIN number of the silver Mercedes. I showed the dispatcher the lease agreement proving I was the sole financier of the vehicle. I told them exactly where the car was parked at the high-rise. I paid them double their standard rate to impound it immediately and hold it at their secure lot. I specified that no one was allowed to retrieve the vehicle without my physical presence and my signature. I went home. Our house was quiet. I walked into the master bedroom. I grabbed 5 boxes of heavy-duty black contractor bags from the garage. I emptied her closet. I packed her designer dresses, her shoes, her handbags. I packed her makeup, her expensive jewelry, her framed photographs, her books, and every single item that belonged solely to her. I worked methodically. I loaded 30 bags into the back of my truck. I drove to a self-storage facility on the outskirts of town. I rented a small, unair-conditioned unit for 1 month. I tossed the bags inside, locked the heavy steel door with a padlock, and kept the key. I drove back to the house. I called a locksmith. He arrived within 20 minutes. I paid him in cash to change the locks on the front door, the back door, and the garage door. I reset the security codes on the alarm system. I logged into the home network and changed the Wi-Fi passwords. I called the utility companies and transferred the bills exclusively to my name. I severed every point of access she had to my sanctuary. I sat in my leather recliner in the living room and waited. At 6 o'clock that evening, my phone rang. It was Linda. I answered. She was screaming. Her voice was shrill and panicked. She asked why her business card was declined at a high-end restaurant downtown. She said she was trying to pay the bill for a business dinner, and the waiter told her the card was reported as frozen. She demanded I call the bank immediately to fix the error. I spoke in a calm, flat voice. I told her there was no error. I told her I froze the accounts. She stopped screaming. The line went silent for a few seconds. The background noise of the restaurant faded as she stepped outside. She asked me what I meant. She asked why I would do such a thing without consulting her, her voice trembling with sudden uncertainty. I told her I conducted an audit. I mentioned the luxury apartment in the Arts District. I mentioned the ski resort in Aspen. I mentioned the fake invoices. I mentioned Marcus. She stammered. She tried to formulate a lie on the spot. She told me Marcus was a real estate developer who was helping her secure commercial contracts. She told me the apartment was a staging unit designed to showcase her work to high-net-worth buyers. She told me Aspen was a corporate networking event, and they booked separate rooms on different floors. I cut her off. I told her I broke into her office and read the emails. I told her I spoke to the concierge in Aspen. I told her I watched them kissing on the sidewalk outside their apartment. I told her I knew the silver Mercedes was gone because I had it towed to an impound lot 3 hours ago. She started crying loudly into the phone. She begged me to listen. She said it was a mistake. She said the business was under too much stress and she made a terrible error in judgment. She said she was coming home right now so we could talk face to face and fix this. I told her she could not come home. I told her the locks were changed. I told her her clothes were in a storage unit on the edge of town and I would text her the address. I hung up the phone. I turned it off entirely. 30 minutes later, a taxi pulled into my driveway. Linda jumped out. She ran up the concrete steps to the front door and jammed her key into the deadbolt. It did not turn. She pushed against the wood. She pounded on the heavy oak door with both fists. She screamed my name, her voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. I stood up, walked to the foyer, and opened the inner door. The reinforced glass storm door remained shut and locked between us. She looked frantic. Her makeup was running down her cheeks. Her hair was messy. She demanded I open the door. She demanded I let her into her house. She slammed her palm against the glass. I looked at her. I felt no sadness. I felt no anger. I only felt the cold, clinical satisfaction of reclaiming my life from a parasite. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I slid it through the mail slot at the bottom of the door. She looked down at it. She picked it up and ripped the flap open. Inside were the divorce papers drawn up by David. There was also the formal eviction notice from the property management company for her luxury love nest, the impound receipt from the tow company for her car, the bank notice showing the dissolution of the LLC, and the brass key to the cheap storage unit holding the remnants of her life. She stared at the documents in her hands. She flipped through them frantically. She looked back up at me. The reality of her situation hit her with the force of a freight train. She had no money. She had no business. She had no car. She had no home. She had nothing but the clothes she was wearing and a man who was only with her because she was paying his bills. She begged. She pressed her face against the glass. She promised to end the affair with Marcus immediately. She promised to pay me back every single dime she took. She said she would sell the design business, liquidate the assets, and give me all the profits if I just let her inside. I told her there was no business to sell. I told her I dissolved the LLC that morning. I told her I was suing her for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty to recover the embezzled funds from her future earnings. I told her Marcus would leave her by the end of the week once he realized the money pipeline was permanently severed. She fell to her knees on the porch. She sobbed loudly, clutching the envelope to her chest. She slammed her hands against the glass one last time, begging for forgiveness. I turned around. I walked back into my house. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of bourbon. I sat in my recliner. I listened to her crying on the porch for another 20 minutes before the taxi driver finally got out of his car, walked up the steps, and convinced her to get back into the vehicle. They drove away. The next morning, I met David at the county courthouse to formally file the divorce papers and the civil suit for fraud. The legal process was swift and brutal. Linda hired a cheap and experienced lawyer who tried to claim she was entitled to half of my retirement assets and a share of the house. We went to court. David presented the financial forensic report. He handed the judge the binder containing the fake invoices, the emails, the bank transfers, and the receipts for the luxury apartment. He showed the judge the sheer volume of money she siphoned from my personal accounts to fund her illicit lifestyle with another man. Her lawyer attempted a desperate maneuver, claiming my actions to freeze the accounts constituted financial abuse. David countered immediately, citing state statutes on corporate fraud and demonstrating that I acted entirely within my legal rights as the primary shareholder protecting corporate assets from ongoing embezzlement. The judge agreed, issuing a stern warning to Linda counsel about presenting frivolous arguments. The judge was visibly disgusted. Because the LLC was structured with me as the majority owner and sole financier, her unauthorized withdrawals were categorized not just as bad business, but as a deliberate and malicious dissipation of marital assets. Linda's lawyer tried to argue that the spending was legitimate business networking. The judge cut him off. The judge ruled that the money she spent on Marcus, the apartment lease, the luxury car, and the vacations would be deducted directly dollar for dollar from any marital settlement she might have received. Since she spent over $210,000 over 2 years, her share of the marital assets was completely wiped out. The judge awarded me full ownership of the house, my pension, and my investments. She lost her health insurance. She lost her country club membership. She lost every single trapping of the wealthy lifestyle she thought she had outsmarted me to obtain. She walked away with absolutely nothing except the clothes in the storage unit and a massive legal bill she could not pay. I learned later from a mutual acquaintance that my prediction was entirely accurate. Marcus dumped her the very day the eviction notice arrived. He refused to pay the $10,000 termination fee and refused to put the lease in his name. He packed his own bags and left her standing in the empty apartment. She ended up moving into a small, cramped duplex with 2 roommates. She took a job working the floor at a discount retail furniture chain, earning minimum wage plus a tiny commission. I sold the large suburban house 3 months later. It was too big for one person anyway. I bought a smaller, custom-built property near a lake in the mountains. I bought a boat. I spent my days fishing, reading, and enjoying the retirement I worked 40 long years to achieve. I rebuilt my savings. I traveled to Europe and South America. I lived my life exactly the way I wanted to, without compromise. I never spoke to Linda again. The last time I saw her was in the courtroom. She looked exhausted, defeated, and much older than her 42 years. She tried to make eye contact with me as the bailiff dismissed the court. I looked right through her as if she were made of glass. I picked up my briefcase, shook David's hand, and walked out the heavy oak double doors without looking back. The lesson I learned was expensive, but it was permanent. Trust is a luxury, but verification is an absolute necessity. I provided the solid foundation for someone else to build a dream, and she used it to construct a massive lie. But the foundation belonged to me. When I pulled it away, her entire world collapsed instantly. I survived because I operated on cold facts, not warm emotions. I secured my perimeter, I cut the supply lines, and I let the consequences of her own actions crush her. Now, the only bills I pay are my own, the only life I fund is mine, and the only person I trust with my future is myself.